reports.
In northwest England, rates of coronavirus are high and rising, but that should be a last resort, says one of the World Health Organization's COVID-19 envoys.
Going back into lockdowns is something that I personally really hope doesn't happen. I understand the circuit breaker idea is pretty short term, but for me, getting the systems in place so that everything can be done as much as possible at local level with central guidance has to be the way forward.
Local restrictions banning households from mixing came into force in parts of the northeast of England yesterday, along with a 10 p.m. curfew on bars, restaurants and entertainment venues. And the government says it's doing what it can to avoid having to tighten the rules further for the whole of the country.
We can avoid a lot of restrictions if we can stick to the rule of six and avoid large informal gatherings, but also whilst making sure that our economy doesn't suffer by getting back to our workplaces and enjoying what our city centres in particular have to offer.
Confirmed daily cases of coronavirus rose again today to 4,422, but the number of deaths is still relatively low. Retired shopkeeper Ali Kira-Zozel from Southend died in April after catching coronavirus. His daughter now fears her mother might fall ill too.
As difficult as it is to bear through lockdowns or all these restraints that are being imposed upon us for good reason, you don't want to add bereavement to the list, really. I just think people have got to be mindful of that could happen. It is a possibility.
She says losing some freedoms is a small price to keep families safe. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
There's more evidence that COVID-19 continues to spread in the latest data released by the government today. In the last 24-hour period, there were 27 new deaths of people who tested positive for COVID in the past 28 days, and there were 4,322 new confirmed cases of the disease. Well, parts of northeast England are experiencing their first weekend under the new localised restrictions, and Amy Lee is in Newcastle. Amy, how are people feeling about the new limits and that they're suddenly facing?
Well, I'm in Gateshead tonight. Just across the River Tyne is the city of Newcastle. It definitely seemed quieter for what you might expect on a Saturday afternoon. And people, they feel resigned to the fact that their lives are going to change again as a result of these restrictions. But here, the nighttime economy is worth hundreds of millions of pounds and it employs thousands of people. And there are concerns that it will be impacted by these restrictions. And it's not just here in Gateshead or in Newcastle. Large parts of the North East are now subject to these restrictions too. And a unique situation here is that the local... It will probably be a lot quieter.
Amy, Newcastle, thanks very much indeed. Well, Labour's first party conference with Sir Keir Starmer in charge began today, but the usual conference hall full of delegates was missing. It's all online for obvious reasons, and our political correspondent Dan Hewitt is here. Dan, must have been a bit of a strange one for everyone involved.
Yeah, of all the list of things we can't do right now, Randy, I suspect for most people, attending a political party conference is pretty low down the list of disappointments. But it is a bit disappointing for Labour. It's a chance really for their new leader to introduce himself to the country, to put out their new policies, a big platform, a big event, party conferences in the political season. That said, as you say, it's all online, all the speeches are online, no crowds in attendance. And to coincide with this online conference, Labour has unveiled a new slogan today. It's a three-word slogan, a new leadership, a not-so-subtle message to say we're not under the old leadership of Jeremy Corbyn anymore. Labour's new leadership fear, I think, that their brand has been tainted by Jeremy Corbyn. Their reputation amongst some voters, particularly in the Midlands and the North, has been damaged. So this under new management slogan has been unveiled, and this is why they've done it.
Well, they looked at the Labour Party in December and said no thank you. They were very clear, the voters said we don't want that, and therefore we had to look at ourselves as a party, and we're more than Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn, so the whole party has had to look at that and soul search about why did the voters reject it so much.
Over the next few days will be to push the idea of want to push the idea that they are a patriotic party. Again, they fear under Jeremy Corbyn voters did not see them anymore as patriotic. So when we hear from Keir Starmer next week, expect to hear him push this idea that Labour is a patriotic political party.
Interesting. Okay, Dan Hubert, thank you, Dan. Now, one of the icons of the liberal left in America has died. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg succumbed to pancreatic cancer at the age of 87. Thousands turned out to mourn her passing and also the loss of the counterweight she provided against conservative rulings on key issues on America's highest court. It's immediately sparked a new political battle over who will name her successor, Donald Trump, before the election, or whoever becomes president after that election, which could be Joe Biden. Here's our Washington correspondent, Robert Moore.
Sisters, let's go down, come on down.
On hearing of Justice Ginsburg's death, hundreds of people gathered spontaneously at the Supreme Court.
Beautiful for
Some wept, and others prayed and sang. For liberal America, this is a severe blow. The woman who symbolized their cause on the highest bench in the land died on the eve of an election, adding to the already high stakes here.
She was a champion for women everywhere and for basically anyone who is underprivileged in this country, and she was a fighter for people who had no voice.
I mean, she was a hero for women everywhere, and to think that she, you know, my life is better today than it would have been 30 years ago because of her means a lot.
America is mourning the loss of a legal giant and a liberal icon. It is also bracing for the most monumental political fight imaginable. One argument erupted even on the steps of the court as we were there. The timing gives President Trump the opportunity to swing the Supreme Court decisively and for a generation to the right. He learnt of the news from reporters after coming straight from a campaign rally, the music still playing.
She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. I just was out of me now for the first time.
He can now nominate his third justice.
She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg had been on the court for 25 years.
To judge people on the basis of what they look like.
Known to everyone by her initials, the question of who replaces RBG will consume America and inflame political tensions here further. She is reported to have told her family her dying wish was her successor be chosen by the next president. RBG will be remembered for her fierce defense of civil rights and of equality for all. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
In the US state of New York, 2 people have been killed and 14 others injured after a shooting at a house party. As many as 100 people attended the gathering in the city of Rochester. Police are still trying to piece together who opened fire and why. Here, police urged hundreds of protesters to leave an anti-vaccine, anti-lockdown protest in London's Trafalgar Square or face arrest. Dozens of officers were involved in the scuffles. And a police protection officer who was travelling with the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has been suspended from his duties after leaving his gun on a plane. The officer had been with Mr. Raab on a trip to the United States. Jewish people around the world are celebrating with extended families unable to gather and synagogue services shorter and emptier. Mark McQuillan spoke to members of the Jewish community as they prepared to observe a very different festival.
Like thousands of others, Sarah Keeble is laying fewer places at the table this weekend. Jewish New Year is one of the community's biggest festivals, but it is being held on a much smaller scale. COVID rules have restricted Sarah's party of 20 down to just her immediate family of 5.
So I'm very lucky that I'm from a big family, but that's quite painful right now because it's going to be very difficult to see everyone. The hardest thing for me is for my kids and their nieces and nephews. They're one of 13 that all live very local to each other, and part of celebrating is celebrating with family, and unfortunately that's not going to happen this year.
There are plenty of other changes to adjust to.
Double register.
Right.
That's for track and trace purposes, yes.
Those attending services at synagogues will need to book in advance, stick to the rule of 6, and a strict seating plan.
Our capacity is greatly reduced for our services. We're having to run extra services at different locations as well. Everyone has to wear face masks. We're not allowed to have communal singing. And we're very careful about how we clean the site as well to make sure that everybody who comes onto the site is safe. It's almost like we're reinventing the festivals from a blank piece of paper, starting again.
Some will avoid services altogether due to ongoing concerns about coronavirus, but the message to those staying at home is one of solidarity.
Every one of our communities has provided something for those people at home, and actually, very importantly, many of our rabbis and lay leaders and volunteers have been knocking on doors, phoning people up, dropping cards through doors to say, you will be missed.
This weekend's Jewish festivities will look and sound very different. Traditionally a time to celebrate and reflect, even more important to do after events of the last few months. Mark McQuillan, ITV News.
Thousands of football fans are returning to stadia this weekend as part of a government-approved pilot scheme to get us back to watching sport in person. Attendance has been limited to 1,000 people at the EFL test venues, and strict social distancing measures are in place. Anna Geary went to see exactly how it worked.
It might seem like a sea of red, but this is nothing compared to the usual crowds that would be flooding in. Supporters were given staggered times to arrive for kick-off at Charlton. Nevertheless, they were glad to be back.
Yeah, it's all about being here and just.
Great feeling. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Been too long since we've been here. And of course, we're season ticket holders, and it's like, what do we do on a Saturday?
The club is one of 7 in the English Football League, taking part in a pilot scheme allowing 1,000 fans in to watch a live match this weekend. COVID-compliant measures include supporters wearing masks, sitting apart, and food and drink is banned.
This stadium can hold 27,000 fans. After Charlton's relegation from the Championship last year and the financial uncertainty that surrounds the sale of the club, today's efforts to encourage fans back into the ground in the future are being welcomed.
Elsewhere, on a different pitch, technology is monitoring fans' movements. At this cricket match, spectators were given a lanyard with a tracking device.
The technology shows you exactly what's going on across your entire stadium. It shows you where there's a cluster of social distancing, and that means you can act on it in the moment. You can send the relevant steward or the individual to that cluster.
Those behind the tech trials say it could be a game changer for other sports too. Anna Geary, ITV News.
Well, still no fans back yet in the Premier League, but Everton have maintained their excellent start to the season. They beat newly promoted thanks to a hat-trick from striker Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And a 7-goal thriller also at Elland Road, where Leeds marked their first home game back in the Premier League with a 4-3 win against Fulham. Finally, the COVID crisis has killed a lot of dreams, but there's one it's helped to come true. Village cricketers across the country can normally only imagine stepping up to the crease at Lords, but today the lack of big match action there has given 2 village cricket teams the chance to compete on that hallowed ground. Here's Ellie Pitt.
For parents, watching their children play cricket at the home of the sport is a day full of excitement and angst in equal measure. Vernon Hales looks on as his sons bat for their Hertfordshire village team. At this level, it doesn't get bigger than the cup final at Lords.
I think it's worse for parents because you can't do anything about it. The players have got something to do. We just stand to all the parents and the supporters. We can't do anything. We just watch them, whereas they can actually control what they're doing.
Cornwall versus Redbourne is one of less than a dozen matches being played at Lords across the whole year.